Hello, Internet, and welcome to the fourth year-end vlog of 2016, a year out to make everybody so depressed that they will give up their New Year's resolutions on January 1st. While the topic of discussion today is more in my wheelhouse of film and television, it also comes with a little bit more of a personal attachment to it. So let's see how well this combination goes. Now you're probably wondering, Romney, what is your beef with Shakespeare? Well, my beef is not with William Shakespeare's works or the person himself, but rather with how his plays have been adapted to feature film. Now, a lot of people, at least people who went to my high school, are under the impression that I don't like Shakespeare's plays. Far from it. I actually do like Shakespeare's plays. I'm just of the opinion that Shakespeare's plays work best when they are performed on the stage. They were written for the stage, and that is where they function best. My reasoning for this is that there's just this kind of magic that comes from watching the plays performed live. When you're watching a group of actors creating this world using only their body movements and their voice to set the stage. But the problem is nowadays, even when it comes to modern productions of Shakespeare's plays, people are kind of losing sight of what makes those plays work and that sense of magic. I kind of came to this realization one time when I was in high school. It was actually the summer between semesters where I was flipping through TV channels because there wasn't really anything to watch, and I accidentally stumbled upon a televised broadcast of the Utah Shakespeare Festival. It was specifically a BYU production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And keep in mind, prior to that summer, we had read the play in class, we had done the whole dissection and doing the various studying things that usually happens when an English class decides to read one of Shakespeare's plays, and I was bored to tears with it when we were doing it in the class, but for some reason I was watching this performance and something had hooked me. I couldn't quite put it into words until now, but it was basically just watching this small set, watching the actors go in and out. This was specifically during the scene where the characters are all wandering the forest and Puck is basically doing the whole, oh, let's put the magic stuff on their eyes to make them fall in love with the first thing they see, and all the madness that was happening. And it was in seeing how, despite how small the stage was, despite how minimal everything was, it was enthralling. A lot of what really made those performances come alive wasn't the set, wasn't the costumes, it was what the actors brought to the characters, especially with the actor who was playing Oberon and the actor playing Puck, and the way they would have the various exchanges when Oberon's saying, hey, you put it on the wrong Athenian, and Puck is just like, hey, you said an Athenian youth, I found an Athenian youth, and then you basically have these like minor things of, oh, they have like a secret handshake, but they don't slow down the whole play. It's just a nice, subtle touch that you just don't quite get with feature film that you do on the stage. And the reason why it bothers me how a lot of these plays have been adapted to film is that there's like a fundamental lack of understanding of what makes Shakespeare's plays work. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not to say that it's impossible to do a good adaptation of a Shakespeare play. People have done it before. I liked the version of Romeo and Juliet with Douglas Booth and Haley Steinfeld. It's not perfect, but I liked how they had little moments that they allowed the actors to kind of ad-lib in character to kind of get that sense of organic wonder to make the characters feel more like real characters. And I also like kind of the cinematic accomplishment that you get with Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, and how it takes the story of Shakespeare, sets it in a more Japanese setting, but then uses the actual art of film to tell its story. I mean, especially the final moments where you do see the trees of the forest like slowly moving towards the Macbeth character. Sadly, I don't remember the name. I really wish I did. But the way it's shot, especially as you see Macbeth being killed, being pelted by so many arrows, all of his soldiers have fled. He is the only one in his castle fighting. And as he's being pelted by arrows, slowly being worn down, you then see the trees slowly coming towards him. And while we know they're actually being cut down, the way it's shot makes it look menacing, makes it look interesting as you're seeing Macbeth's empire crumble. And this leads to kind of the main problem I have with adaptations of Shakespeare's plays when they're done poorly. People feel so married to the words that they feel that, oh, we'll do all of these other drastic changes, but keep everything the same as it's written. Honestly, if you're going to go through the effort of changing the setting, changing the time period, and making all of these other changes, why do you still anchor yourself to the way it's written? You're already going far in your changes, then go all the way with your changes. Do your own unique version of the story. And we've seen it done before. You have stuff like the aforementioned Throne of Blood, but then you also have stuff like West Side Story, which is Romeo and Juliet, just told through an entirely different lens. Now, there is another reason why this is such a sticking point with me, and why I always tend to bristle a little bit when I see these Shakespeare adaptations. Now, to give you some context, the high school I went to is kind of the high school that would exist if, in some weird alternate universe where a school had to slash its budget, it decided to cut athletics instead of the arts. That was my high school in a nutshell, since it was more dedicated to the arts, but also more specifically dedicated to filmmaking, which is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about film as a medium. Now, there were a lot of creative people, both in my graduating class and people that were younger than us. You had a lot of talented writers, makeup artists, actors, and actresses. You had a lot of creative people. So, naturally, when I was hearing rumors that there were plans to incorporate the entire school into making a feature film, I got kind of excited because I thought, hey, yeah, we have all these creative people. I'm sure if we all worked together, all pooled our resources, we could come up with something worthwhile. But then it was announced that the project in question would be an adaptation of a Shakespeare play. And not even one that would make sense for teenagers to adapt, but rather Macbeth. What rubbed salt in the wound even further was the exact pitch was Road Warrior Macbeth. Now, I'm not against changing the time and setting if it's done right, if you're actually going to do something unique with it. But let me ask you, would you pay to see a Road Warrior version of Macbeth if it was all acted out by a bunch of high schoolers? Naturally, I was angry. Like, really angry. Now, keep in mind, the person I was at that time was someone who had just seen what had happened at the very rigged Utah High School Film Festival where teachers judged the shorts instead of actual film professionals, which led to films being disqualified for really arbitrary reasons, but that's a separate discussion for another time. But ultimately, I saw it as a waste of creative potential. I mean, yeah, the way everybody was pitching, it's like, oh, Road Warrior Macbeth. It had the sense that nobody was going to take it seriously. And frankly, it didn't look like anybody was taking it seriously, and that was one of the major reasons why I basically vowed to not work on it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, yeah, people gave me crap for it. I even got docked points in a lot of my other classes for it, but that was how I felt. Because, one, I saw it as a waste of creative potential. Two, I didn't have any confidence that the people adapting it had any understanding of what the play was about or what actually made it work. And thirdly, I simply did not trust the people who were in charge of that production. So Macbeth comes and goes, they shoot it, it gets screened like once at the Tower, people watch it at the high school. Luckily enough, I got out of the showing of it because I was shooting a different short film at the 11th hour. And then we move on to the next project, an adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing. This is from even just seeing a bunch of the trailers and a lot of the things that were going on behind the scenes, that was pretty much the embodiment of a film that subsists entirely on insider jokes. And I had seen moments of the film screened, and it also pointed out how people weren't really understanding the fact that a film needs an internal consistent logic. Because you literally would have a scene where you have characters saying the lines of dialogue as they're written in the Shakespeare play, and then in the next moment they're talking like normal people. And you can tell it's ad-lib because of a stupid fight scene involving some stupid BS with a cow heart, and it's just like, oh, they're talking all Shakespeare, and then suddenly, now we're suddenly talking normal in an improvised thing just so we can have a fight scene with a cow heart. And it just bothered me because you could see that there wasn't any real effort to make sure that there was any internal consistent logic, and people didn't care about the quality of the final product. Luckily, that occurred during the last year in high school, and I didn't have to deal with any of that anymore, but that's kind of why it's a bit of a trigger point for me, because there's just that annoying fundamental misunderstanding of what makes the plays work, and yet when people try to defend the stupid actions of things like the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet, I tend to flip out because they don't get it. And this is not coming from someone who's just like being bitter of, oh, they're doing this instead of one of my original ideas. No, this is coming from someone who is genuinely passionate about theater, genuinely passionate about these plays, genuinely passionate about theater as an art form in and of itself. Now, I do believe it is possible to do a Shakespeare adaptation right, but honestly, there's two things you really have to consider. One is that you have to acknowledge, yeah, some things that are written work best on the stage, and you have to find a way to translate that to feature film. Something that would be a long soliloquy on stage could be accomplished with a simple shot, even a simple close-up look from an actor, in a much shorter amount of time. And it's the same case where if you're going to go out of your way to do it in a different setting, to do it in a different time period, and to just completely change what the story is set in, then actually commit to the idea of doing something unique and different with the idea instead of just tethering yourself to what's written on the page just to get on the good side of a bunch of English lit nerds. Because if you're not willing to commit to your own idea, then you're just wasting your time, and by extension, you're wasting the audience's time, because if you're putting out a half-hearted product, that will come across on screen. And that, my friends, is why film adaptations of Shakespeare plays are such a trigger point for me. Yeah, it is for a lot of personal reasons, but it's also because I just get the feeling that a lot of the people who are making these adaptations just don't understand what makes the plays work, and as a result, those films suffer. There are good versions out there, like versions that put in a lot of effort and do have that fundamental understanding. It's just that they tend to be few and far between, and let's face it, here in the US we don't get as many of the good ones as we do the bad ones. So that's it for this year-end vlog. I'm going to stop it here before I work myself up into a rage and end up smashing all of my very, very, very expensive equipment. Now, I know it's coming from a very personal place, so I'm not going to necessarily ask if you guys agree with me or disagree with me. I mean, if you have anything to add to what I've said in this video, feel free to comment below, but I know that it's very much a case where my bias is pretty clear. It's something I will be working against in the future, should there be more films based on Shakespeare's plays in the future, but I just wanted to throw that all out there and kind of explain a lot of my frustrations and kind of where they were coming from. So, on that note, well, that's 4 videos down, 1 more to go. I'll see you all next time.